Hi, everyone. I think we're going to get started. Thank you for joining our winter driving webinar. So today we'll have a short presentation on winter driving, and we'll follow that with an awesome discussion with our panelists. So in just a moment, we'll do some introductions. My name is Caroline. I'm an electric vehicle program associate on our Drive Green team. So I get to help do some community outreach and awesome presentations like these. I'll pass it on to Anna and Aryan, and then we'll introduce our panelists.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anna. I'm our electric vehicle program director, and I'll mostly be in the chat today, and I'll pass it over to Aryan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ariane. I'm the Clean Transportation Intern here. Super excited about this webinar to help us all learn more about winter driving in EVs. I'll just be here taking some notes and also helping Anna manage questions in the chat. Thanks.
So our panelists, do you want to take a second to introduce yourself? Adriana, do you want to start?
Hi, my name is Adriana Lovegrove, and I own a Volkswagen ID4.
I'm Jim Garrett. I have a 2019 Hyundai Kona, so representing kind of the older side of the spectrum. And also we got a 2023 Volkswagen ID4.
Alec, do you want to take a second to introduce yourself and tell us what kind of car you drive?
Hi, this is Alok. Can you listen and can you hear me? Just
Yes.
trying to make sure.
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. Yeah. This is Alok Garg, and I own 4.5-year-old Tesla Model Y. Before that, I used to have Chevy Bolt.
Okay, thanks so much. So everyone, you've gotten a chance to meet our panelists and our Drive Green team. So we'll get started. And after this slideshow, we'll continue with our panelist discussion. And you'll have a chance to ask some questions as well. All right. Just to note, this webinar is being recorded. We will send out the recording and we will upload the recording to our YouTube. So when we follow up with our webinar slides, we'll make sure that you have access to and a copy of the webinar today. We'll just go over a couple of logistics. So everyone will be muted throughout the webinar. There will be a chance to answer questions, to ask questions during our panelist discussion. So feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Or if you have another question that maybe is more technical or has more details, feel free to raise your hand during our panelist discussion, and we'll make sure that you have the ability to speak and we can have a conversation that way. I mentioned before, the webinar will be recorded, but we'll follow up with some other resources related to winter driving in addition to the slide deck itself and the recording. Closed captions are available too. There should be an option to click closed captions at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to see that. All right, we'll get started. I'll take a moment to introduce us, Green Energy Consumers Alliance, in case this is one of your first webinars. Welcome. We're a nonprofit organization and we're based in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and our mission is to empower consumers and communities to speed a just transition to a zero carbon world. We're presenting today from our Drive Green team, which focuses a lot on electric vehicle educational programming. We're really excited now that the weather's getting colder to highlight some tips and tricks behind winter driving in your EV. So today we'll cover a few things. We'll start with how colder weather and colder temperatures impact range and what you can do about it to make the most of your range. We'll talk about heat pumps and their role in helping to enhance some of your range in the colder weather. We'll move on to driving in the snow and some tips behind winter charging. We'll finish with tips to make the most out of driving in the colder weather and enhancing your range, and that'll follow with our panelist discussion. So firstly, Cold temperatures do increase an electric vehicle's range, and this is due to a couple of reasons. One being that the battery chemistry, meaning some chemical and physical reactions that happen, occur more slowly in cold temperatures. And two, energy from the battery goes into warming the battery itself in the cabin when you turn your vehicle on and when you turn the heat on as well, if you are driving in the cold. And it's important to note that energy that is going towards the battery or the vehicle itself, for example, if you're warming up your car, does not go towards moving it forward. So there are a few things you can do, like preconditioning your EV, for example, which we'll talk about, which can help to both make your car a little bit warmer and get the most out of your range during the colder seasons. And it is important to remember that cold temperatures decrease the efficiency of all types of vehicles that are on the road. So gas cars will not be able to go as far on a gallon of gasoline in colder temperatures as well. You might ask yourself, how much range loss you can expect when it's cold. So we'll look at a couple of examples with different temperatures and a couple of studies to look at some of that range loss you can expect. But as a bottom line, when it is sub 32 degrees or freezing, you can expect a range loss anywhere between 10 to 30% of that promised EPA range. But the real answer is that it really depends how much range loss you can expect. It'll depend on the vehicle itself, so the battery chemistry, what it's made of, how you're heating your car too. So we'll look at heat pumps and resistive heaters and what role both of these heating technologies play into helping to enhance your range. The conditions outside will matter and will impact how much range loss you can expect. So, for example, how cold it is outside when you're parking your vehicle, whether you might opt to precondition your vehicle before charging or before heading inside to drive. And as well, we'll look at some of the heating features and options and the impact that they have. Heating technology helps to impact some of that range loss. So we'll look at two types of heating technologies. We'll start with a resistive heater. The resistive heaters use a lot of energy, and essentially how they work is they'll run electricity through a conductor to produce heat. Heat pumps, on the other hand, move heat from the outside air using what's called a condenser with refrigerant, but essentially to break that image down, you can think of an AC running in reverse. So even during the colder months, a heat pump will take some of that moisture and heat from outside and transfer that to heat your vehicle. A heat pump is much more efficient. Some of you may have heat pumps in your home. Some vehicles are equipped with heat pumps as well. And we'll look at a couple of examples, but in short, heat pumps are much more energy efficient and help with that range loss, helps to mitigate that. Often we'll reference resources like from Recurrent. The Recurrent Auto does a lot of research and does a lot of EV education for different consumers. And Recurrent Auto had a study where they looked at 10,000 EVs, and these were real EVs that are on the road taken from their consumer database. And when looking at heat pumps, the study found that EVs that were equipped with heat pumps retained a whopping 87% of range in sub 32 degrees temperatures. And this was compared to a 72% of range retention for EVs that were not equipped with heat pumps. You might ask what EVs are equipped with heat pumps. So we'll look at a list in a couple of moments. More and more EVs are equipped with heat pumps nowadays. So we'll make sure that you have access to that list and can get a good understanding of some of the EVs that are available with that heating technology as an option. we're looking at a graph from Recurrent right now. Essentially, this graph is presenting a Tesla Model 3 as an example and relating it to the discussion around different heating technologies. We're really focusing on heat pumps here. So we're looking at Tesla Model 3 as an example. On the left, we're seeing the percentage of real range that it is retaining during different temperatures. And on the bottom, we can see a few different examples of colder temperatures because we're thinking about winter conditions right now. So we have a Tesla Model 3 that is from the model year 2021 that has a heat pump. And we have a 2020 Model 3 Tesla that does not a heat pump. And you'll notice that the Model 3 that is equipped with a heat pump does retain a little bit more of its range, of its promised EPA range than the EV without the heat pump. And you'll notice that because that red dotted line, which represents that Model 3 with the heat pump, is higher than that of the EV without the heat pump. So even in some of the colder temperatures, you can expect looking at a 15 to 10% difference, meaning that an EV with a heat pump will, based on this assumption, and in this case, retain around 10 to 15% more of its range. It will be great. We'll continue to look at this in real numbers as an example, because range does fluctuate based on the model we're looking at. Continue this discussion, we're looking at some data here from our friend Rod. Rod drives a Tesla Model 3, so we're continuing with that example. And essentially, what he recorded is data from driving his Tesla Model 3 in the winter. We'll see on the graph vehicle efficiency as well as miles recorded. On the left, we have efficiency measured in percentage, and on the bottom, we have different temperatures. So essentially, you'll notice that his EV, in terms of efficiency, will fluctuate depending on the temperature, which is recorded on the bottom. Towards the right end of the graph, where we're looking at temperatures ranging from 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 70 degrees to 80 degrees, his Model Y was more efficient. And this complements what we know to be a general rule for EVs generally, and some studies back this up, but generally when it is around 65 to 75 degrees outside within that range, an EV will be more efficient. So this is an optimal operating temperature for an EV. Gas cars perform a little bit similarly in that, of course, all vehicles on the road will suffer some range loss and loss of efficiency during the colder weather, but all vehicles on the road will have an optimal operating temperature, which is generally around the 70-degree range. And we can continue to move on, but I would love to highlight when we're looking on the left, we're looking at some of those shorter temperatures. That efficiency, I'd see, never fluctuates below 50%. And then, of course, it continues to climb the closer we reached around 70 degrees. So continuing the discussion with heating technologies, mainly heat pumps as a means for an EV to further enhance its range during some of those colder months. We wanted to provide a list of some EVs that are out there that either are equipped with a heat pump at the base model or have specific trims where a heat pump is available. So some of these highlights, again, we're taking from Recurrent Auto as a source, and this is a particular list, but some of these models are a 2025 or 2024 Chevy Blazer EV, the Equinox as well, the 2025 Nissan Ariya, the 2025 Ford Mustang Mach-E. These all have heat pump options available, as well as specific trims of the Hyundai Ioniq 5, 6, as well as of the Rivian R1T and R1S. All Tesla models have a heat pump as well. You know, we looked at the Tesla Model 3 and a couple of the previous examples. To move on to charging, while all road vehicles will have an optimal temperature for operating, and we've seen how efficiency can be impacted by colder weather, charging is impacted too. So in general, in colder temperatures, charging can be a little bit slower. To start at level 1, if it is super cold outside, most of the energy will actually go towards warming the battery. But within DC fast charging, that slower charging speed that we talk about when it is colder is more noticeable. And to help mitigate that, you can actually condition your battery or precondition your vehicle. And that is increasingly an option with most EVs that are available. And it's essentially a feature that can help prepare the vehicle for fast charging and help to warm that battery so that less energy actually goes towards warming that battery. And it helps to mitigate that what would be a slower DC fast charging speed. And actually, I'll highlight in this image, like I mentioned, battery conditioning is becoming more of an option. And if you drive an EV already, you might have used this feature before. But what we're looking at here is a dashboard with an infotainment screen. And you'll notice that you can actually read about battery conditioning as a mode. And there's a graphic here too, so you can see what it is doing to the car. EVs will handle snow and ice depending on a couple of things. EVs in general have a lower center of gravity than a gas car, for example, depending on the vehicle type, because the battery is heavy. And that low center of gravity are actually very helpful when driving in the snow and ice. We'll look at some different tire options. There are some resources out there that have compiled lists of recommended tires to help make the most of handling snow and ice in different road conditions. Drivetrain is something to consider too. Many EVs have an all-wheel drive option. You might consider that if you're thinking of making the switch. You can still charge outside, of course, when you are driving an EV in colder weathers. If you charge at home and if you haven't yet installed a charger at home but are thinking about it, a pointer could be to look at a charger that has a NEMA rating of 3 or 4, meaning that that charger is weatherized and is safe and tested to charge outside. All right. We'll move on to some of those winter tires that I mentioned before. Tires and traction and the vehicle's low center of gravity all affect how that EV because tires really impact how any vehicle will drive in different road conditions. But these recommendations are specific winter tires for electric vehicles. And there are 2 resources that we're pulling from here. One, which is from the card guide, and another, which is from Recurrent Auto. And actually both lists took into account different sets of tires and had criteria and ranked their recommendations. So if you would like to look at the comprehensive ranking system, both of those resources are linked here. But to highlight, these are a few of the recommended tires. And again, whether a specific tire is recommended for your EV might depend on the EV model and trim. Again, these 2 resources take into account different EVs and different trims and can provide a more specific and personable recommended tire for your vehicle. All right, as we move on, I'd love to highlight a few tips Baseline tips really for driving in the winter, because winter is coming and it has gotten colder. So a couple of things to keep in mind are preheating your vehicle, one, and preconditioning your battery when you can. By preheating your vehicle, that vehicle and that battery start to be warmer so that when you do start your charging session, it will be faster than it would have been if you had not preheated your vehicle. When the battery is already a little bit warm, that charging session can go a little bit more quickly, considering the temperature outside. Using seat warmers as a feature or a steering wheel warmer, which many EVs are equipped with, are great ways to both stay warm as a driver or as a passenger, and another way to keep your EV warm without solely relying on the vehicle's heat, which of course uses a little bit of energy. No lead foot is another tip. Of course, maybe you want to be mindful about regenerative braking. If you are slowing to a stop, you can remember that regenerative braking will help to capture energy and bring that back to the battery. We recommend cleaning off your car if you have a lot of snow on the vehicle. Again, this might seem small and marginal, but this will have an impact and keeping your vehicle a little bit warmer. If you can, parking inside or somewhere warm, or charging somewhere warm if you have a garage and are able to, or looking for a charger that has a NEMA rating of 3 or 4. All right. We have a couple of events coming up. So before I move into our panelist discussion, love to highlight some of these events. So tomorrow, I believe, or in 2 days, we have a webinar on heat pumps for homeowners. If that resonates with you, I'd love to see you there. On December 12th, we have a GMA or General Municipal Aggregation webinar and looking at the electric grid from the future from a municipal perspective. We have more information on our website with more details, and on January 13th, we have a webinar that is related to a project we're working on called Community Charge. And there are a few different partners on that project, but essentially it will connect nonprofit and public entities to discounted means of charging installation. So love to plug those events. And now I think we'll move on to our panelist discussion. So I will stop screen sharing in a moment and we will begin our discussion. Lastly, if you feel inclined to donate, we always appreciate your support as a nonprofit to continue growing and supporting our programs. We have a donor match throughout the month of December. So every donation is matched up to $47. A link is provided here. And all right. If you do have a question, we'll have time to ask and follow questions the remainder of the webinar, but always love to plug our Drive Green community Facebook group or our emails, which we will put in the chat. But for now, I'll stop screen sharing and I think we can begin our awesome panelist discussion.
See, there are a few questions in the Q&A.
Oh, awesome. All right. Great. I think that maybe we can take a couple of minutes to do the Q&A after we've done a couple of our panelist questions, because maybe in some of our conversations, we might even answer and cover some of these questions. So if you had put a question in the Q&A, we'll make sure to answer it within a few minutes after starting our discussion. Right. Hi, Rod.
Hello.
Hi. Do you want to tell us what car you drive?
Yeah, currently I have a Hyundai Ioniq 5, a 2025 model. It's a little under a year old now. I previously drove a Tesla Model 3. I had that for about 6 years. Before that, I had a Chevy Volt plug-in hybrid. So I've got experience with, I mean, not a huge range of EVs, but several.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Oh, uh, I saw one hand was raised. If you have a question, yeah, please feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat, and we're happy to promote you to a panelist for you to answer your question or for you to ask your question, sorry. Well, I think now that we have all of our panelists here, can ask our first question. So I'd love to know, everyone, how your experience with driving in the winter has changed since you got an electric vehicle.
I think my answer would be there was some change between just generally driving an EV, but I'm not sure that my driving changes much in the winter. I do see some range reduction, but it hasn't really been practically important. I haven't had to stop more often, than I would have before, probably because, when you're on a road trip, you have a theoretical range, but then you also have a specific set of available stops, and you have just because it's there and the one that comes after is too late. And so we're probably stopping more often than we really did. We could, if the right stops existed, we could go a little farther. We stop, and I'm not seeing much difference in the locations we stop in the winter.
Yeah, I would say to go. Oh, sorry, Jim.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
One other thought came to mind. There was the mention of conserve energy, and I think that's great. But if it's in a longer road trip, or anytime you're going to be in a car for more than 15, 20 minutes, you're probably going to have to run the climate control to keep the humidity down. So you're climate control and use the energy and just go on about your life and charge when you need to charge. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I noticed a decrease in range in the winter, especially when I put my heater on. But really, I'm only losing like 20 or 10 miles when I turn the heat on. So it's not a huge enough difference for me to like stop more often. Definitely something to notice, but nothing so major that it changes how I drive per se.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest differences between driving during the summer versus the winter in an EV are going to be on road trips. For day-to-day driving, losing 10, 20, 30% of your range isn't a big deal unless you're an Uber driver or something like that. But also compared to driving a regular car, there aren't going to be huge differences. You might need to stop more often on a road trip, but that depends on the range of the car and how much range it loses in the cold weather. But compared to a gas car, I think the biggest difference is that you're not going to have to stop once a week and stand by the pump for 5 minutes in the home, so you can charge at home, and that's much easier, and you're not going to freeze your hands off that way.
Definitely. We got a question in the, yeah, go ahead, Alec.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Rod that day-to-day driving doesn't change much, but I do have experiences driving in extreme cold, and means yes, you do have to stop more often than probably with a gasoline car. extreme cold is the what is the charge level in my car at the destination. So, and usually means at least in Tesla level, the charge level at destination is pretty accurate, but it does goes down if the weather changes. And let's say if there's a snowfall or something else, I do see a little bit drop. It does hold steady though, most often. And for other cars, I know that there are apps that can do that, like ABRP, I guess.
Yes.
And yeah, so if you track that, then that will help you reach your destination. Means, and if you can say that, okay, I would like to keep a margin of 20 to 30% in my battery. So you can choose to stop early if you think that reaching the next stop is beyond your margin. So that helps a lot.
Just out of curiosity, you said extreme cold. What's your idea of extreme cold?
So last year we had a road trip when the temperatures were in lower 20s, means not lower 20s, but lower teens. And there was a snowstorm as well. And we were traveling more than 300 miles.
Wow. Yeah. That segues into another question we had about your experience with long trips or road trips in the winter. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that, Alec. 300 miles is pretty substantial.
Yeah, so when we do go out for long trips, we do little bit of planning. At least when we are, means in summers we don't do as much. We just we just go without even planning. But for winters, I do check where I'm going to stay. Um, is there uh, do they have chargers nearby for overnight charging, or if not, do they at least have plugs for overnight charging? Because if I can plug in my car even in a 110 volt socket, it does add up overnight. Let's say you are staying there in Airbnb for 15, 16 hours, then that's around, you can add 25 to 30% range. So that's quite a bit. So that's one thing I often do. Then as I kind of mentioned before, that I do keep track of what is my charge level at the destination. So I always use navigation while I'm doing long distance driving, because you never know. Means the range estimation on the car might be wrong, but the charge level at the destination often is more accurate. At least that's what I've seen in Tesla. I'm not sure about other cars. Yeah, other than that, I agree with other people, as other people have mentioned, that maybe using the seat heaters does help a lot. Also, one thing I've noticed is that at least when I'm driving in extremely cold weather, and because the next stops are planned out, at least precondition the battery, because it is expecting another charging session in maybe next 1 hour. So what I've seen is that it saps the energy out of the battery. It just continuously preconditioning the battery, and that further reduces my range. So sometimes what I do is that I stop the preconditioning and only start the preconditioning when I'm close to the charger. So that means I'm okay. I can wait longer, a little bit longer at the charger, but I don't want my range to go down so that I have to even stop earlier. So that's another thing. Kind of, I don't know what other people, but that's what I've seen as well.
I know some cars have an option for manual preconditioning. That might be a nice feature if you're looking for a car. maybe
Yeah,
hit
that
a
would be
niche.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I regularly do a winter road trip from Rhode Island to Cincinnati to visit my sister, and that's like 650-ish miles, something like that. So it's a pretty long road trip, and I've never had a problem with that. I've always done this in my Tesla Model 3. I haven't had my Hyundai Ioniq 5 long enough to do it in that car, but I don't expect any problems in the Ioniq 5. In the Model 3, um, of course, I've done this several times, and the weather has varied each of those times. Mostly, this is around Christmas, so it's late December, and usually that's just before the worst of the winter weather hits. So the temperatures have usually not been all that bad. There was one year when it was very bad, and that graph that you showed earlier, Caroline, from was for my car's data, and the very cold temperatures from that graph were from that trip when it got down to like 0 degrees Fahrenheit at some points. And for that, the range did drop to like 55% of theoretical, something like that. But the worst part of that wasn't really the range loss. It was that in those temperatures, my car was having a hard time keeping the windshield clear of ice and mist and stuff. And I actually ran out of windshield wiper fluid. But of course, those issues you could encounter in any car. It's not an EV specific thing. The Tesla Model 3, or all Teslas, really, one of the jokes about them is that they're designed in Southern California for Southern California. So you got cold temperatures. They're better today than they were in the past, but they don't always handle it as well as some cars do. Other automakers, the big three in Detroit, they know how to handle cold temperatures.
We've mentioned preconditioning a bit, and in case some attendees might be unfamiliar, can any of our panelists share about the different types of preconditioning and your experience with preconditioning your EV in the winter?
Sure, I could do that. Their preconditioning usually refers to heating or sometimes cooling the battery so that it's in an optimal temperature for fast charging. And as Alok, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, mentioned, there's a trade-off for that because you're using energy that could go into range in order to reduce your fast charging time. And you might or might not want to do that. Most EVs today will precondition the battery when you navigate to a DC fast charger that the navigation system knows about. But that requires that the navigation system know about that charger, which sometimes it doesn't. Teslas have, obviously all the Tesla superchargers in there. My understanding is that they're now starting to add some non-Tesla chargers, but a lot of non-Tesla chargers are not in the Tesla navigation system. And similarly for other brands, there might be lags with new stations coming online, so they might not appear there. Until recently, Tesla superchargers weren't in there because other cars couldn't use them, but these days most cars can, and that's still improving. VW just got access like 2 days ago or something. There are issues there. Some cars, as I think Jim mentioned, have a special button you can press to activate preconditioning. Sometimes that's buried on the menu, which is kind of a pain. That's the case with my 2025 Hyundai Ioniq 5. And preconditioning also is sometimes used to refer to heating or cooling the cabin. So you can use the app on your phone to heat or cool the cabin to a reasonable temperature so you don't freeze to death in your first minute getting into a really cold car, that sort of thing. But those are two different kinds of preconditioning. They're completely different. Heating the cabin will do very little to heat the battery and vice versa. There'll be some heat transfer, but not a lot. So I don't know if anyone else has anything to add on that.
I'll jump in. Oh,
So I
sorry.
would add that battery precondition probably takes a lot more energy out of the car's battery versus probably the cabin preconditioning. And because once it is preheated, right, it kind of holds the heat. And if you have a heat pump, then it is pretty efficient. But battery preconditioning cools down pretty soon. And so even though it does have a thermal envelope around it, so that kind of saps the energy a lot faster.
Yeah, and battery preconditioning can also take a while. It takes like half an hour, sometimes even an hour to do it.
Yes.
It depends on the temperature, and it's the temperature of the battery, not necessarily the outside temperature. So if you start from a warm garage, then preconditioning the battery will likely not do any good, even if it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit outside.
And the optimum temperature to charge fast is higher than the optimum temperature for the battery to run on the road. So I'm guessing these cars that have preconditioning probably cool the battery after the charging's done, which also takes a little energy. Just, I don't know for sure, but I would think that would happen.
I want to jump in here real quick just to say we've got some EV nerds on this call who are excited to talk about preconditioning. I think for most drivers, and I can speak to my family's, I don't own an EV, but my parents do, preconditioning mostly means you turn on the car 3 minutes or 5 minutes before you get in if you want to while it's plugged in, and you heat up the seats and it's nice and cozy when you get in and your range drops minimally. This preconditioning the battery for DC fast charging is automatic in some vehicles. You can do it if you want to really maximize your driving experience, but you don't have to worry about this for like 99% of your driving or even 100% of your driving. You can just go about it. I'm actually curious, Adriana, because you don't charge at home. Do you ever precondition?
No, I was just gonna say I have never preconditioned, well, at least not to my knowledge. I've never pressed a specific button or turned anything on to do it. I don't have charging at home, I have charging at my office, and so I just automatically get into my car and drive to the office, which is about a 10-minute drive, and then plug in from there. So I assume the car has already warmed itself up by the time I got to the office to charge.
Well, you're using level 2 charging, right?
Yes, yes.
So this really isn't going to make a difference. You're going to hit your charging speed on level 2, even with the cold battery. It's really for DC charging that you would, and it can make a difference. If you come in, if you're on a road trip and the battery's cold, you can spend, 10, 20 minutes longer at a charge than if the battery's warm. And I think the VW, since I have one as well, I know ours does not have any preconditioning. I did see someone on YouTube do a demonstration where they drove aggressively, accelerating and decelerating like continuously on the way to the charging station in order to warm the battery because they didn't have a preconditioning, feature, and they had a control ID4 that just drove normally, and it made a big difference in the charging time. But I don't know if I would advise that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. So I would say that there are pros and cons of battery preconditioning. And if you have automatic battery preconditioning, then you just have to be aware. But one thing I kind of have realized is that with the cabin preconditioning, means electric cars does not have an engine, means they warm up really super fast. I mean, you sit in it and within less than a minute, it would be warm enough. So I never do preconditioning my cabin because it just warms up so fast. So that's one thing. It does kind of, if your vehicle is plugged in, it does take a little bit of energy out of your battery though.
Rod, I had a question for you. And I think we had a question from the chat about finding a charger's NEMA reading and where to find that. Do any of you have any intel or anything you'd like to share about that?
Yeah, the NEMA rating, well, NEMA, there are several different types of NEMA. There's a NEMA plug type, like 1450, but for weatherproofing, that would be probably a NEMA 3R, or NEMA 4 would be what you want for an outdoor charging station. Those are normally advertised by the manufacturer. So if you look through the specifications that you find on the manufacturer's webpage, or if you go to like Best Buy or someplace that sells them, they'll normally say, you know, NEMA 3R enclosure, NEMA 4 enclosure. NEMA 3R is good enough for just about any sort of weather that Mother Nature will throw at the thing. NEMA 4 is a step above even that. That's supposed to protect the hardware if you have like a pressure washer. If you're washing the outside of your house with a pressure washer, it should stand up to that. And most of the home chargers you find today have at least a NEMA 3R rating. So you're probably good for almost anything. There's some older ones that I don't think are even being sold anymore that were not protected for that. And also some portable units probably don't have particularly good weather rating.
Curious for our non-Tesla drivers, because we know that most or all Tesla models can come with a heat pump. So for Jim driving Hyundai Kona, and Adriana, with your experience with your Volkswagen, curious, do your EVs have heat pumps?
No, neither one does. The year we bought the ID4, 2023, it was advertised as an option, but because of supply chain issues, it wasn't being supplied, so we didn't really have the option, and we got it anyway. The Kona found has been surprisingly efficient just by being smart about how it does the heating. You know, it controls the fan speed and the recirc and everything automatically, and it does a pretty good job. So I think I'm not too worried about efficiency, even though it does not have a heat pump. The ID4, I think we see more lost part. Maybe it's not as smart, or also it's just a bigger car, so there's more to heat up.
Yeah, with the Ioniq 5, it varies depending on the drivetrain. If you get a rear-wheel drive version, it does not have a heat pump. If you get the all-wheel drive version, then it does. And I'll also add that you say that all Teslas have heat pumps. That's true of all Teslas that are currently being sold new, but they added the heat pump in like 2020 or 2021, something like that. So older Teslas, including the one that I drove, do not have heat pumps. That could be important if you're looking at.
Do any of you all have experience with getting special tires for your EV for different weather conditions?
I don't. We just use the stock tires. We have had some tire replacements with the Kona just because we had a flat tire once, and I think we just replaced it with the tire that was there. I would also say, we started our EV journey in 2019. Climate change being what it is in the Boston area, we haven't had all that much snow, and most of our road trips have been southbound, so we really haven't had that much occasion to go through a lot of snow. So I can't really testify too much, although I can say that traction on, I once had a challenging gravel road, a wet gravel road to go up, that the traction control that an EV has was definitely challenged, but it did manage. The front wheel drive, the Kona, did manage to pull very slowly up the hill. So I imagine it would do as well as a gas car on snow, all else being equal.
So I have driven quite extensively on snow, and I don't use special tires. I use all-season tires in my car. And I have been okay so far. I mean, this is what I have seen. So one thing I've realized is that also the electric cars have fast traction control system. So because the electric means the battery gives out the current, so everything kind of runs pretty fast in electric cars. So the traction control system is lot responsive than could be in gasoline cars, just the way it is the electric cars are. So in comparison with the equivalent gasoline car, they will have a better traction. And if you have dual motor cars with all-wheel drives, then means most probably you're going to be okay with all-season tires, even on snow. That's my experience, but can vary with other people.
We have a question about charging at level 1 in cold temperatures. Do any of you have any experience? Do you ever charge at level 1 or maybe earlier in your EV journey, or if you charge at home in cold temperatures?
I have, but not regularly. And I found that in cold, well, this was with the Tesla Model 3, and in cold temperatures, like below, I don't know, 25 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe, the car spends so much energy trying to heat the battery that you're not putting any energy into the battery. So it's kind of a wasted effort. But that's for the Model 3. I have heard online that the Hyundai Ioniq 5 does better with that, but I don't have any personal experience with it. So it probably varies from one model to another.
Rod, do you have any sense for the time scale of that? Because I would think it would take some time to heat the battery, and then it being a big mass, that it would eventually plateau and then maybe even in cold weather.
Yeah, I left it plugged in for, I don't know, 12 hours or something and wasn't getting anything. So I just unplugged at that point.
So I have a positive experience charging my car at probably around 0 degree Fahrenheit. So like we were staying in Airbnb and the temperatures were really cold, and we came back to the Airbnb and I immediately plugged my car to the just the level 1 plug outside the house. And I can see that it was charging a lot slower at 8 amperes instead of probably 12 amperes by default because of the cold temperature. But I was able to get almost 20% range within 14 hours, 13, 14 hours. So that was quite a bit. I think one good thing I did was that I started the charging as soon as I reached the Airbnb. So that kind of helped retain the heat in the battery. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that might be the reason.
I wanted to jump in, if it's all right, for just a closing out question. What would you all say to any other drivers about tips, in particular, maybe to any drivers who are nervous about driving an EV for the first time in cold weather conditions?
I would say use the navigation and as much as possible, and so that it can give you accurate charge level at the destination, because the range estimation which displays on the car can be quite wrong. So that's one thing to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I guess a better route planner would also work for that, because it's also valuable not only for temperature but also for topography. So if you're going through the mountains, your range estimate is from the car is not really going to mean much if you're going to drive to the top of Mount Washington or something. But a better route planner knows the altitude change and can factor that in, and so you can have a higher assurance that you're going to get there with the charge that you think you should have. I guess I might just say I've noticed, not specific to winter, but just generally road trips, some reticence of people even who own EVs to try a long distance road trip, and maybe I would suggest just going to a DC fast charge station and plugging in if you have never done it, just to get over that hump. It may seem daunting because it's, you have to have apps and it's a different experience, but just try it, get over that hump, and then maybe you'll feel more confident about taking a road trip.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not as scary as it sounds. I know we've been like giving you a lot of facts about how things change in cold weather, but overall, I haven't done a lot of road trips in the cold weather, but just my day-to-day driving hasn't really been majorly affected by the cold weather. I'm not as savvy as these other fellow panelists here are. I usually just get in my car and drive it, and I haven't had any issues driving in the cold weather, especially in Providence, Rhode Island.
Yeah, another thing I'd suggest is if you got a new EV or if you're considering buying an EV, check out a Better Route Planner, which has been mentioned a couple of times for road trips specifically. You can go to the app or website and say you've got a particular car, and then put in your current location and some destination, and it'll plan the route and tell you where to charge. And then you can fiddle with some options in there, so you can tell it you're driving in 70 degrees Fahrenheit versus you're driving at 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and see what it does to the routes. It'll probably be the same route, but it may add an extra charging stop. And just sort of play around with that a little bit, and you'll get some idea of what's entailed in terms of how many stops you need to make and how long they're going to be, that sort of thing.
I might add too, if you have an EV and you've seen range loss, in the winter, especially when you're doing errands around town, you're probably going to get better performance on a road trip, because when you're running errands around town, you're stopping, you're letting the warm air out of the cabin, you're letting the car cool down, and you get back in the car and heat everything up again, and you have all that loss. Whereas on a road trip, you heat up things once, you drive for 2 hours, and then you get out, and you'll probably see better performance that way. You'll still see some loss relative to summer, but don't be scared off by what you're seeing with range loss in local driving.
Great. Thank you for joining us, fellow panelists. Does anyone have any last closing thoughts to add? Okay, awesome. Thank you everyone for joining our webinar today and tuning into our conversation. If we didn't have a chance to answer your question, I put in our email addresses in the chat. So the Drive Green team can be reached at drivegreen@greenenergyconsumers.org. And my email and Anna's email are all in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to us. We'll send the presentation recording and slideshow. If you want any more extra information about any of the content we covered, so we'll be sending that over soon. Thanks again for joining us, everybody, and have a good lunch.
Thank you.